Human beings have always been driven by desire. Long before civilization, long before governments, long before technology. Desire helped our ancestors survive. It motivated them to seek food, form relationships, build families, and pass on their genes. In evolutionary terms, desire was not a flaw. It was a survival mechanism. For most of human history, however, desire existed within limits. People lived in small communities. Opportunities were limited by geography. Attractive individuals were relatively rare. Human beings experienced attraction, but they experienced it within the boundaries of reality. Then something changed. In the span of just a few decades, technology removed those boundaries. For the first time in human history, the human brain gained access to an almost unlimited supply of novelty, attraction, fantasy, and stimulation. A smartphone can now expose a person to more attractive faces in a single hour than their ancestors may have encountered in years. From an evolutionary perspective, this is an extraordinary shift, because while technology has changed rapidly, the human brain has not. The same biological systems that evolved thousands of generations ago are now interacting with digital environments specifically designed to capture attention. To understand why this matters, we first need to understand how desire actually works. Many people think desire is simply a response to pleasure. Psychology tells a different story. Desire is often driven not by pleasure itself, but by anticipation. The anticipation of a reward, the possibility of something better, the expectation that satisfaction may be just ahead. At the center of this process is dopamine. Popular culture often describes dopamine as the pleasure chemical. But neuroscientists have found that dopamine is heavily involved in motivation, learning, and pursuit. In many situations, dopamine activity increases before a reward arrives. The brain becomes excited by possibility, not certainty. Possibility. This distinction is important because modern digital environments are built around possibility. The next video, the next notification, the next recommendation, the next attractive face, the next source of stimulation. Every interaction presents uncertainty, and uncertainty is remarkably effective at holding human attention. Psychologists refer to this principle as variable reward, a concept observed in gambling systems, slot machines, and many forms of habit-forming technology. When rewards arrive unpredictably, people often remain engaged longer than when rewards are predictable. The brain keeps searching because the next reward could appear at any moment. Modern technology did not invent this mechanism. It learned how to use it. Every swipe introduces novelty. Every scroll introduces uncertainty. Every recommendation introduces possibility. The result is that desire is no longer an occasional experience. It becomes a continuous state, a background process running throughout daily life, and this is where the story becomes more complicated, because the companies competing for attention are not simply competing with each other. They are competing against your ability to look away. Every platform wants a few more seconds, a few more clicks, a few more interactions, because attention has become one of the most valuable resources in the modern economy. The longer someone remains engaged, the more advertisements they see. The more advertisements they see, the more revenue is generated. As a result, many digital systems are optimized for engagement, and engagement tends to increase when content triggers strong emotional responses: curiosity, fear, excitement, anger, and perhaps most powerfully, desire. This creates a situation unlike anything previous generations experienced. For most of history, attraction was connected to reality. Today, attraction can be experienced endlessly, without any meaningful human interaction. A person can spend hours consuming stimulation, while forming no genuine connection at all. The brain, however, still responds, still anticipates, still pursues, still searches, and over time, that constant cycle of pursuit begins to shape behavior in ways most people never notice. Because the effects are rarely immediate, they accumulate gradually. Attention begins to change. Patience begins to change. Expectations begin to change. What once felt exciting becomes ordinary. What once felt rewarding becomes expected. The brain adapts, and that adaptation may be one of the most important psychological challenges of the modern world, because if desire can be activated constantly, if stimulation can be delivered endlessly, if attention can be captured indefinitely, then the question is no longer whether technology influences human behavior. The question is how much. And to answer that, we need to examine what happens when the human brain is exposed to unlimited stimulation for years at a time. The human brain evolved in a world of scarcity. Attractive people were limited. Novel experiences were limited. Opportunities were limited. For most of human history, the average person spent their entire life within a relatively small social circle. Their brain never had to process an endless stream of new faces, new experiences, and new sources of stimulation every few seconds. Yet today, that is exactly what many people experience. The modern world provides something evolution never prepared us for: unlimited stimulation. At first, this sounds like an advantage. More options, more entertainment, more information, more opportunities. But biological systems do not always function better when resources become unlimited. In many cases, abundance creates problems that scarcity never did. The human reward system is a perfect example. Every time the brain encounters something potentially rewarding, it pays attention. Not because it knows the reward will be valuable, because investigating possibilities was beneficial throughout evolutionary history. If a distant sound might indicate food, it was worth investigating. If a new person might represent an opportunity, it was worth paying attention. Curiosity increased survival. The problem is that modern technology continuously triggers those same mechanisms. Every swipe presents novelty. Every recommendation promises possibility. Every refresh introduces uncertainty. The brain responds exactly as it was designed to. It becomes curious. It becomes engaged. It keeps searching. Over time, however, constant stimulation can begin altering what feels normal. Psychologists often describe this process as adaptation. Human beings gradually become accustomed to repeated experiences. The first exposure feels exciting. The second feels familiar. The 100th barely feels noticeable. This is not a malfunction. It is how the brain conserves attention and resources. But when stimulation is constantly increasing, adaptation creates an interesting problem. What once felt rewarding begins to feel ordinary. What once captured attention loses its impact. The brain starts seeking stronger, newer, or more frequent stimulation, not because someone consciously decides to, because the reward system is adapting to its environment. Imagine listening to music in a quiet room. At first, the volume seems loud. After a while, it feels normal. Then someone turns it up slightly. Again, it feels stimulating. Eventually, the process repeats. The same principle can occur psychologically. As stimulation increases, expectations often increase alongside it. And when expectations rise, ordinary experiences can begin feeling less rewarding by comparison. A conversation may feel slower. A book may require more effort. Studying may feel less engaging. Working toward a long-term goal may feel frustrating compared to rewards that arrive instantly. The issue is not that these activities have become less valuable. The issue is that the brain is comparing them against experiences specifically engineered to maximize stimulation. And that comparison is rarely fair. The modern attention economy understands this dynamic extremely well. Its success depends on keeping people engaged, not for minutes, for hours, not once, repeatedly, every day. This is why recommendation systems are so effective. Their goal is not simply to show content. Their goal is to predict what will keep a person's attention for as long as possible. The more accurately they predict behavior, the more valuable they become. Over time, these systems learn what triggers curiosity, what triggers emotion, what triggers desire. And once those patterns are identified, they can be reinforced again and again. The result is a feedback loop. Desire creates attention. Attention creates engagement. Engagement trains algorithms. Algorithms deliver more stimulation, which creates even more attention. Most people experience this cycle without ever noticing it. Because it feels natural. There is no alarm, no warning sign, no obvious indication that expectations are changing. The process is gradual, almost invisible, yet its effects can be significant. Because when attention changes, perception changes. And when perception changes, the way people view themselves, others, and relationships can begin changing as well. Which raises a deeper question. If unlimited stimulation can reshape attention, what happens when it begins reshaping the way people understand attraction, intimacy, and human connection itself? For most of human history, relationships developed through familiarity. People met through families, communities, work, shared experiences. Attraction was important, but it was rarely the only factor. People learned who each other were over time. Trust was built gradually. Character revealed itself slowly. Modern environments operate differently. Today, first impressions often carry more weight than ever before. A photograph, a short video, a few seconds of attention, a brief moment of judgment. In many cases, decisions are made before meaningful interaction even begins. The result is that visibility often becomes confused with value. The most visible people are not necessarily the most compatible. The most attractive people are not necessarily the most trustworthy. The most desirable people are not necessarily the most fulfilling partners. Yet when attraction becomes the primary filter through which people encounter one another, deeper qualities can become harder to notice. Patience, empathy, commitment, integrity, emotional maturity. These characteristics reveal themselves slowly, but modern systems reward speed. And when speed becomes the default, depth often becomes the sacrifice. This creates a conflict between human psychology and modern technology. One encourages exploration. The other requires commitment. One rewards novelty. The other depends on familiarity. One constantly asks what else is available. The other asks what can be built together. And when people spend years adapting to environments optimized for novelty, stability can begin to feel unfamiliar. Not because stability lacks value, because the brain has become accustomed to constant stimulation. Psychologists have long studied something known as the paradox of choice. The assumption seems logical. More options should create more happiness, but reality is often more complicated. When options become excessive, satisfaction can actually decrease. Because every choice creates awareness of alternatives, the more possibilities people perceive, the harder it can become to feel certain about any single decision. In digital environments, perceived options are almost limitless. There is always another profile, another conversation, another attractive person, another possibility. And while unlimited choice appears liberating, it can also create restlessness, the feeling that something better might always exist just beyond reach. This mindset does not remain confined to screens. It follows people into real relationships, real friendships, real intimacy. Instead of asking whether a relationship is healthy, people may begin asking whether something better exists elsewhere. Instead of investing deeper, they continue searching wider. And endless searching rarely produces contentment, because contentment requires commitment. Commitment requires limits, and limits are exactly what modern systems often encourage people to avoid. There is another consequence that receives less attention: comparison. Human beings naturally compare themselves to others. This tendency existed long before the internet, but the scale has changed dramatically. For most of history, people compared themselves to a relatively small number of individuals. Today, they may compare themselves to thousands, thousands of appearances, thousands of lifestyles, thousands of carefully selected moments. The problem is not comparison itself. The problem is that people are often comparing reality to performance. A person's ordinary life is being compared to someone else's highlight reel. Their private struggles are being compared to someone else's public success. Their insecurities are being compared to someone else's carefully curated image. The comparison is fundamentally distorted from the beginning, yet the brain often reacts as though it is real. Over time, repeated comparison can influence self-worth. It can influence confidence. It can influence expectations about beauty, success, relationships, and status. And perhaps most importantly, it can influence satisfaction, because satisfaction becomes difficult when people are constantly measuring themselves against unrealistic standards. This may help explain one of the strangest paradoxes of modern life. Human beings have never been more connected, never had greater access to communication, never had more opportunities to interact. Yet many studies continue to report growing levels of loneliness, dissatisfaction, and social isolation. Communication has increased. Connection has not necessarily increased alongside it. The two are not the same. Communication is the exchange of information. Connection is the experience of being understood. One can exist without the other. And in a world overflowing with stimulation, attention, and constant interaction, genuine connection can sometimes become surprisingly rare, which raises an uncomfortable possibility. At its core, the lust trap survives because it exploits a confusion that exists in nearly every human mind. The confusion between stimulation and fulfillment. On the surface, they can feel similar. Both create excitement. Both attract attention. Both can feel rewarding. But psychologically, they are very different. Stimulation is immediate. Fulfillment develops slowly. Stimulation demands more. Fulfillment creates enough. The human brain naturally seeks stimulation because stimulation signals potential rewards. Throughout evolution, this tendency helped human beings survive. But survival and fulfillment are not the same thing. A system designed to pursue rewards does not automatically know when enough has been achieved. That is why people can continue wanting more, even after receiving what they once believed would satisfy them. The next achievement, the next relationship, the next source of excitement, the next distraction, the next fantasy. Desire constantly points toward the future. Fulfillment draws attention back to the present. And modern systems are exceptionally good at keeping desire active. Every notification suggests something new. Every recommendation suggests something better. Every advertisement suggests something missing. The message is always the same. Just one more click, one more scroll, one more moment of attention. The result is a culture built around pursuit. But pursuit without direction eventually becomes exhaustion, because attention is limited. And whatever repeatedly receives attention gradually shapes experience. This is why some of the most meaningful human experiences are surprisingly simple. A genuine conversation, a close friendship, a loving relationship, meaningful work, a sense of purpose. These experiences rarely provide the intensity of constant stimulation, but they often provide something more valuable: depth. And depth cannot be endlessly consumed. It must be built. The solution, then, is not to eliminate desire. Desire is human. The goal is to regain authority over it, to recognize when desire is serving growth and when it is simply serving consumption, to distinguish between what captures attention and what deserves attention, because there is a profound difference between the two. The lust trap is not a single platform, not a single application, not a single piece of content. It is a cycle that convinces people that fulfillment is always somewhere else, always ahead, always beyond the next click. Yet fulfillment rarely exists in the endless pursuit of more. It is often found in the things pursuit causes us to overlook: connection, meaning, purpose, presence. The greatest freedom is not the ability to pursue every desire. It is the ability to decide which desires deserve your attention. Because in a world designed to constantly capture the mind, where you place your attention ultimately becomes the life you experience.